Well, we return with February on the horizon in the EFL Championship, and we've got a full weekend of fixtures to predict and preview before things get, well, a little bit spread out due to the FA Cup fourth round. So today we're going to look ahead to match week 30, preview and predict the score for all 12 games. And as always, I'll encourage you to do exactly the same in the comments below. Give us your score predictions for this weekend's action, and if you beat or match my overall score, you'll get a shout out in the recap next midweek after we've looked ahead to the bonus midweek fixtures when we go and look ahead to a depleted match week 31. It's a busy week to come. We've got mini fixture lists all the way along, so we are here today. We'll be back on Sunday, and we'll also be here on Thursday next week. But for now, before we go and look ahead to match week 30, let's have a quick look back at what happened in both match week 29 and the one rearranged midweek game. If we start with last weekend, to be honest, it was another good match week for me, my third in a row, and I'm a little bit annoyed because it should have been my third successive outright win, but I lost ground on the Monday night by trying to be clever and predicting goals in Burnley versus Leeds. I only got one perfect score. That was for Coventry v Watford, a 2-1 win, which seems to be the new Championship's favourite scoreline. There were 4 in a row in the middle there on Saturday, but 6 other correct outcomes get me 9 points overall, and only 2 people managed to beat me. It was a low scoring match week overall, lots of shocks. We saw the big win for Hull at Sheffield United, Sunderland dropping points home to Plymouth, etc. But beating and matching me this weekend, Steve, level on 9 points. Well done to you, regular player and consistent performer. But 1 point above us on 10. The joint winners for match week 29, Sam and Brian, 2 of our regulars, both getting 10 points apiece. A quick shout out in midweek as well, where most of us were fooled by Millwall's win at Pompey despite being depleted by injuries. Portsmouth's 7-game unbeaten run at home came to an end. 3 of you predicted the correct outcome, Simon, Dave and Alan, and 2 of you predicted the perfect score. Stuart and Daniel both going for a 1-0 Millwall win, and Daniel even shut the right goal scorer in as well. So well done to all of you. But now we get back to the bread and butter as we look ahead to match week 30. And it is a big weekend starting on Friday night with a Lancashire derby, Blackburn Rovers versus Preston North End. And this game has become a lot trickier to predict than it was perhaps a couple of weeks ago, because Blackburn's form, as we probably predicted, is just starting to slide now. 3 defeats in succession, albeit 2 of them away from home, where they've been pretty average all season. At home, though, defeats against the likes of Burnley and Coventry recently are making things a little tougher to call. The manner of the performance at Bristol City, perhaps a little bit less concerning, because although they lost the game late on, although they gave up chances, they had some unbelievable opportunities on the break. And on another day, to be honest, they could have won that game, and they could have won it pretty handsomely, but didn't take their opportunities, did still give up a few too many overall. And in the end, they were punished for it with a 2-1 defeat. For Preston, though, things are starting to look rather good. 5 games unbeaten now in all competitions. And if you look at the table now, they're on 37. I know they're still in 15th, but they're starting to push in towards that middle of the table now. And they are starting to play with a little bit more urgency going forward. Of course, as Magic being back has made a difference. Jakobsen got his goal at the weekend as well. We're starting to see some of the attackers hit a bit of form. We shouldn't be fooled too much, because Middlesbrough on another day could have won that game. They're a side that famously don't take their chances. But Preston have taken advantage, and while it wasn't the glitzy, brilliant performance we saw at Watford in the week, they ground out another result, and they've done so in different ways. I'm starting to become really impressed with how they're performing under Paul Heckingbottom, not conceding goals, as they weren't for the most part under Ryan Lowe, but also starting to add a little bit more attacking threat into their game, trying to create chances and go at teams, which is something we all want to see, and has been sorely lacking a bit in the Championship this year overall. It does make this game a really hard one to call, because it's one of those games, and we get to this stage of the season and you start to see weird results. I think last weekend was probably the first sign of that. And you look at this on paper and you go, well, Preston are the form team. But then something just happens. So I'm going to go for Blackburn Rovers to win this game. I think the 2 sides they've lost to at home recently were both top half sides. I know Preston aren't many points behind. They're only 1 behind Coventry, in fact. But I've just got a funny feeling. The Championship plays tricks on your minds at this stage of the year. And I'm going to start to go bold. Blackburn Rovers to win. 2-1 against Preston. Moving on to Saturday, and we start with 3 early kickoffs. The first of them, a big game. Well, is it a playoff contending team on the road? Because it's Oxford United hosting Bristol City, who have moved up to 8th place with another win, this time against Blackburn Rovers. I know a little inconsistent on the road, but at home they're grinding out results. And I think this is what's impressing me more with Bristol City this year, and I've mentioned it a lot. Liam Manning has adapted his style, and they've probably been less easy on the eye than at times in previous seasons, but it means they're giving away less sloppy goals. They're certainly giving away less late goals, and they're starting to score a few of them themselves. I know they gave up some great opportunities against Blackburn. Let's not be fooled. While Bristol City had most of the territory and had more of the chances in the match, Blackburn had most of the best ones. They had 2 or 3 clear, incisive counters and should have scored against them. But Bristol City are finding a way to get results, and that is mightily impressive in what is a very tight race from 5th down in the Championship. For Oxford United, the dream start under Gary Rowett continues. I know it won't have felt like that when watching that game at Oxford. It wasn't a brilliant game of football, let's be honest, but Oxford had the better of it. Stoke didn't create much clear cut. It was a very solid defensive display. And to be honest, on the counter, they had a couple of chances to nick it, Oxford. It was one of their most polished away performances in the Championship. In the end, they were maybe a little disappointed to only get a point. Having said that, they went into that Stoke game having won back-to-back home games. It's 7 points from the week. They stopped the likes of Plymouth and Preston gaining ground on them. They're now, 16th place, unbeaten in 6, looking very comfortable. We know that run's got to come to an end soon, but against Bristol City, I don't think it's going to happen. I'm pretty convinced this is going to be a draw, and I know Bristol City can throw one in, but they've had a couple of 2-2 draws on the road recently. They did give up chances against Blackburn, and Oxford United are always competitive at home. So I'm going to go for a thriller. It's probably the game of the 3 I'd be most inclined to watch on a Saturday lunchtime. I'm going to go for Oxford United to draw 2-2 against Bristol City. As we move on to the team that finally found an away performance, it's Plymouth Argyle versus West Bromwich Albion. Plymouth probably were one of the surprise results of the weekend. A 2-2 draw against Sunderland, a late equaliser in that game as well. Look, it wasn't a brilliant display, but again, had some great chances on the counter-attack, restricted Sunderland to less than they normally create, and gave up possession, but looked tactically astute, which you've got to say, given some of their recent performances, I only said it last week, they're dead and buried the way they're playing, but that was a much better performance, far more disciplined, and maybe Miran Muslic is going to adapt his style now and try and get the best and eke some results out of Plymouth, because other teams above are winning. They're 7 points from safety now. They've got to start finding results. And while they were brilliant at home under Wayne Rooney and very poor on the road, it's been the opposite since Muslic came in. They were dismal against Burnley. They were poor against QPR and should have lost by more, and got a bore draw against Oxford, who are a side they should be aiming to beat. The Sunderland game does bring encouragement, but it's not enough at the minute. And in West Brom, they're coming up against a side who, in their first home game under Tony Mowbray since his reappointment, found some real quality. Now, we've got to bear in mind, Portsmouth were rotating on the road, trying to rest players for the home game in midweek. Didn't work. We'll talk about that later. And yes, they gave up chances, West Brom. Defensively, they weren't that robust, but they were so much more creative going forward. They created good chances, they took them, and in the end, it was a really comfortable day at the office, a fantastic performance, and exactly what we expected to see from a Tony Mowbray side. So the question is, can West Brom translate that to the road? They don't often score many away from home. Can Plymouth produce a better home display than their last couple, which were absolutely abysmal? I have no idea. I'm going to go somewhere in the middle just because I don't know what to go for. So instead of going for an absolute hammering for Plymouth or West Brom to fail to score, I'm going to sit in the middle and I'm going to go for West Brom to win by 2-0 at home park. And the final early game is another one in an outside race for the playoffs. It is Watford versus Norwich City. Watford, unfortunately, hitting poor form at the wrong time, but they've had a tough run of fixtures. The Preston one was the disappointing one at home, but another defeat this time against Coventry City. Away from home, disappointing display. And to be honest, the late consolation drew them back into it, but Coventry had the best chances of that match. Didn't do much with the possession, Watford, and they are going to have to adapt tactically a little bit, but let's be honest, they're doing a good job with the squad they've got. They're 3 points off the playoffs, and any talk of Tom Cleverley losing his job is stupid in my opinion, but we've seen Watford go down that road before. For Norwich, another side that got back in form in style, had 3 really tough games in the Cup against Brighton and then against the top 2 in the league, but at home against Swansea, they found their comforts and did it far more convincingly than perhaps their Coventry and Luton wins at the start of January. A 5-1 victory, a dominant display, and that again, they're always going to give up chances, Norwich, the way they play, but going forward, they look a real threat. We talked about some of the stars being out, but it's a timely return for Josh Sargent, and boy, did he look sharp again in that one after a couple of sub appearances. Lots of others contributing off the bench and late on, but it's just about opening those teams up. And the crucial moment in that game was clearly when Sargent scored immediately after the equaliser, and it just set Norwich on the right foot. So a really important result for them after a fairly sticky run over the festive period. And they're now back in that playoff race, looking for a result here. And against the Watford side out of form, you feel like they've got an opportunity. But Norwich have always been pretty dismal on the road. They were poor last season when they made the playoffs. I know they won at Luton, but even that wasn't convincing. I'm going to go for Watford to nick it. A bit like the game on Friday night. I just feel like something's got to give here. I'm going to go for Watford by 2-1. Let's get on to the 3 p.m, shall we? Starting with Derby County versus Sheffield United. I do feel for Derby because there's talk about Paul Warne and his job, but they've been in decent home form all season. But their recent home games, they've played Sunderland, they've played Watford, they've now got Sheffield United. Even some of their away games, Sheffield Wednesday, Bristol City in the top half. The Cardiff result last weekend, probably the first one of real disappointment where you'd maybe expect them to get something out of it. And on another day, they might have. They gave up far too many chances and they've been doing so all season. But on the road, they haven't had many games where they've created that many good chances. They had a couple of opportunities to get the result. In the end, didn't quite take them. The signing of Matt Clark coming back is a really important one. Going to be crucial for them in their battle for survival. But I still think, even though they've dropped into the relegation zone, if they can get past this weekend and they do stick with Paul Warne, I think they'll be absolutely fine. For Sheffield United, I don't think any of us saw that coming. One person in the predictions went for a draw. Everyone else went Sheffield United win. Hull played him off the park. It was tactically perfect. I know Sheffield United had more chances, but they didn't really create anything clear-cut. It was a lot of play in front of Hull City, a lot of desperate half efforts, etc. And then on the break, they were just so vulnerable. They didn't have the legs to cope in midfield at times. Hull City on the break took advantage in wide areas and they were just clinical, which was brilliant to watch for them. But for Sheffield United, a concerning weekend. I guess the good news, didn't really lose any ground because none of the top four got a victory, two of them drawing against each other. But just a really bizarre day. So it's going to make this game a little harder to call. But Sheffield United won't produce two performances like that in a row. Derby are coming to the end of a sticky run. They just need to get through this one, stick with Paul Warne. I think they will lose at home to Sheffield United, narrowly, by 1-0. Let's move on to another big game at the bottom end. Two teams level on 29 points, looking to pull away from the bottom three. It is Hull City versus Stoke City. Stoke held frustratingly by Oxford United, and in truth, if anyone was going to win that game, it was the away side. They had the better chances, they had the better opportunities, and they had more opportunities. Stoke really haven't looked great so far. Mark Robins struggling to get a tune out of the players, but we saw this with Schumacher last year. If you remember, he came in, they had a slow start, they dropped into the relegation zone, there was talk about him, and then they just pulled away. It's going to take a little bit of time. I still think sacking Schumacher all the way back was the wrong idea. They've set themselves back with Narcy Palak, but at least they're picking up points. If you take out the Pompey game, I know it's all draws, but they are drawing every game. They're unbeaten this year apart from that. But Hull City produced the performance of the weekend. A 3-0 victory at Sheffield United. We talked about it a minute ago. Ruthless and brilliant on a counter-attack. Tactically astute from Ruben Telles defensively. The only question comes about the style of football, because we saw Liam Rossini attack for finishing 7th, but playing a very similar style. How long is Ruben Telles going to get away with that for? Or is he going to get the chance to evolve the team? I don't know. But a crucial result for them. Back-to-back away wins sandwiched by a poor home defeat against QPR. Can they find some home form now? Scored 3 against Leeds, but they've looked defensively poor at home recently. I think on this occasion, given that Stoke have already had 3-0 this year, they're going to find it tough to score. I'm going to go for Stoke City to lose on the road again, very narrowly, by 1-0. Can't see that game being a thriller. Let's move on to a game where you could use the B word, but the 2 times we used it last weekend, we got caught out. It is Leeds United versus Cardiff City. Leeds in a, predictable 0-0 draw against Burnley, thwarted by a team that didn't want to win the game. One shot on target for the visitors late on. It was an awful game of football. And look, Burnley set up like the away side, which didn't help. Leeds had the ball, but they couldn't find a way to break down a very organised defence. It is one of the worst games of Championship football I can remember. And unfortunately, it was put on TV, which it was always going to. But Leeds United aren't going to find the same problem against Cardiff, despite a good run of form. In fact, both of these sides unbeaten in several weeks now. Cardiff got a 2-1 win against Derby. They created chances. They still give a fair few up. We always know that. But they are starting to look much better going forward. So, got to praise Omer Riza for the work he's been doing. But they've conceded 44 goals. They're coming up against the best attack in the league. Leeds have scored over 50. The last two home games, 2-0 and 3-0 against opposition higher in the table with better defensive records. I think it's going to be a very comfortable victory. I know I normally get caught out with the scoreline when it's Leeds, but I'm going to go for a comfortable win. And Cardiff's little unbeaten runs come to an abrupt end with a 3-0 defeat at Ellen Road. As we move on to a tough one to call at the Den, it is Millwall versus Queen's Park Rangers. QPR's good run in the league came to an end with a 2-0 defeat at home to Sheffield Wednesday. Bit of a frustrating day, done late on by those changes. More physical players coming on for Wednesday and taking advantage. And again, QPR just don't create that many clear-cut chances. They've not got that clinical edge in front of goal. Had a lot of possession but couldn't break a team down. Just one of those days. But they're having a very good season. In the end, they were just beaten by a more ruthless side. On the other side of it, we've got Millwall, who kind of enforced due to injuries. A lot of people mention the injury crisis in the Pompey prediction show, but the thing I want to say about that is that I think it's kind of benefited Millwall because Alex Neil has been forced to go back to sort of the Neil Harris way, the sitting behind the ball. We mentioned the fact that against Luton, it was a terrible game between two out-of-form teams, and it was settled by a moment of magic. And the Pompey game, Millwall were defensively robust. They gave up one or two chances, but they sat deeper. They hit on the counter. They had one shot on target and one other good opportunity. And he scored one of them. And Ivanovic was the man again. And at the moment, that's enough to get them the points. They move up into mid-table. Back-to-back wins for Alex Neil. Very much like they were doing under Neil Harris at the start. It's 1-0, it's get the lead, and it's defend well. And they've got that structure at the moment. We'll see them gradually progress their style. But at the moment, they just need to pick up the points, get themselves up the table. And you never know, this playoff race is open this year. I really don't know what to predict in this game because QPR have been brilliant all year aside, but they haven't drawn any yet. I think that's going to change this weekend. I can't find anywhere else to go for one. I'm going to chuck in the Championship's favourite scoreline of 1 apiece at the Den. As we move on to the side that didn't want to win on Monday against the side that have had a very poor week, it is Portsmouth versus Burnley. For Pompey, the gamble of resting lots of players against West Brom away from home did not pay off. A 1-0 defeat at home to Millwall, a game where they had more of the territory in the shots, but I think a couple of the Pompey fans said it in our Discord. They said, give away the same goal every week. And that's the unfortunate thing. Didn't take their chances, which they have been doing at home recently. But Millwall are a very tough team to break down. The positive for Pompey is they conceded less chances than normal. But it is the same chances and are leading to goals, which is the concern. For Burnley, I feel a little bit deflated because, look, they're doing so well defensively. To concede 9 goals in 29 games is ridiculous. And there is a place for it. It clearly works. It's got them in the mix. But you just feel there's got to be more attacking intent. They did not show any ambition to win the game against Leeds. It was a dreadful spectacle. It was similar against Sunderland, where they were almost caught out. It was James Trafford's heroics that saved them. But to be at home, to not have a shot on target, to not really show much impetus at all. Yes, they restricted the best attack in the league to next to nothing, but is that enough? I don't know. We'll find out at the end of the season. It's very different to what we saw before from Burnley. On this occasion, I do actually think they'll win. I think they'll score goals on the road against Portsmouth, a bit like we saw at Plymouth and at the Cup at Reading. If they're given chances, they'll take them, and I think they will on this occasion. Pompey always give up opportunities at home. I do think they'll score, unlike the Millwall game. I'm going to go for Burnley to win this one by 2-1, and then their run of 3 successive clean sheets. On to the game I'm fearful of. It is Sheffield Wednesday versus Luton Town. For Wednesday, a really good win at QPR. A solid season again. Danny Roll's doing such a good job. 2 late changes. He made tactical adjustments during that game that worked really well. Patterson came into the team. Smith came on. Both added a physical presence in this game, and it really made an impact, didn't it? Dealt with the threat defensively from having Jimmy Dunn as a fullback now at QPR, but also then gave them the impetus going forward. They were brilliant. They've got Shea Charles back, which I think is magnificent for the rest of the year for them. He's such a key part of what they've been doing this season, and having him back for the rest of the year, for me, gives them a little outside chance at the playoffs. For Luton, it was another defeat at home to Millwall, a terrible game. Penalty save was great from Kaminsky. I mean, there wasn't much from either side. Luton had one great opportunity, but otherwise created next to nothing. From open play, just don't look like scoring. Everything's coming from set pieces. But the positive is there's been magic added this week, and we need those moments like Millwall had against us. The addition of Asgard from Wigan, I think, is a really good addition to the club. There are a few clubs, I think, higher up the pyramid that could have taken the gamble on him, and he's someone I think will make a profit on. We've also bought Cal Naismith back, which on paper looks a bit of a weird one, but just having a fit, balanced defender at the minute and a leader back there, because I've talked about it before with McGuinness and some of the others as well. They're decent players physically and technically, but they need someone to coach them through the game, and Cal Naismith is the sort who can do that, and he stays fit, which is more important than anything else. Will allow Doughty to push further forward, give us some creativity out wide with him and Asgard. And I did criticise Bloomfield for his change of tactic mid-game against Millwall, but on reflection, I look at the bench and the way he clearly wants to set up with a 4-2-3-1. And actually, is there anyone he could have brought on to stay in that shape? Probably not. So it kind of is restricting him, the players there. They're not suited to his style, and he's made changes to try and adjust to that. I think it's going to make a difference. I'm hoping it's going to lead to a result. I don't think it's going to be this weekend. Sheffield Wednesday for me. They've got arguably one of the best managers in the Championship. I'm a massive fan of him, what he's done at the club. And Danny Rollside, I think, are going to romp to victory by 2-0 against Luton. And the final game on Saturday is a big one in South Wales. It is Swansea City versus Coventry City. Swansea are having, well, a pretty treacherous run, aren't they? And it's not the fact that they've been losing this year. They've been losing heavily. 4 at Portsmouth, 3 in the Cup at Southampton, 3 at Cardiff, 5 at Norwich, and a defeat at home to Sheffield United, a draw at home to West Brom. It's difficult because their home fixtures have been tough ones, as it is again this weekend. But away from home, they've been so bad. The way they folded against Norwich after conceding straight after the equaliser was pretty pathetic, to be honest. Their performance at Cardiff, again, once they conceded the first goal, they fell like a pack of cards. The first half against Portsmouth was, again, pretty shocking. They're just conceding goals in clusters, and we always say that's the most worrying thing for any team in the Championship. For Coventry, much on the flip side of that, 3 successive victories, just 6 points off the playoffs now. Starting to look a little bit better for Frank Lampard's side. Not vintage performances for the most part, but Victor Torp, the hero at the weekend, as they scored with their only 2 shots on target. They did create the better of it across the match, but they gave up the ball a little, played a bit more on the counter. It was a bit more of a Mark Robbins-esque performance, to be honest with you. And it was a really good home win for them. The win on the road at Blackburn was really impressive, and they're coming up against a side who are atrociously out of form. There's an argument that Swansea will just produce the moment here, but I've done it in a couple of the games, gamble for teams to find form again. I think Swansea are in a little bit of a tough spot at the minute. I'm going to go for Coventry to win by 2-1 at Swansea. And the final game on Monday night, live on free-to-air TV. We'll be watching on ITV as Middlesbrough face Sunderland in a huge game in the North East. It is 6th v 4th, and it is 2 sides that had a very tough weekend. Sunderland stunned late on by Plymouth. A really decent away showing from them, but Sunderland, that's a game they really would have fancied winning, and it's such a missed opportunity as well, because looking at the other teams not picking up the points, what had happened to Sheffield United on Friday night, they could have got themselves up into joint 3rd place and back within 3 at the top. As it was, Plymouth probably had a couple of the best chances of the game. Sunderland dominated the ball. They weren't able to break a team down. We've seen it a few times this year where they've just drawn games they probably should have won. Unfortunately for them, they've just not quite got the defensive record of the top 3, and I think that ultimately might be what cost them. For Middlesbrough, another one of those days where they just weren't taking their chances. Again, probably had more of the game than Preston, but the thing with Borough that we've said this season, they're always going to give up a goal. You look at that top sort of 7 in the table, they've conceded 8 more than anyone else up there, and you just wonder if that's going to be costly or if they can score their way out of trouble most of the time. They've added some good players. Ryan Giles is back at the club, a player that Michael Carrick is a massive fan of. And he did win their last home game pretty comfortably against West Brom. So it does make this one tough to call. There'll be a lot of people going for a draw here. But I think Middlesbrough are going to nick it. I think they're generally finding their form more often than not. The goals have dried up a little bit, but I think they're going to produce a win here. 1-1 is a score I was very tempted to go for. But I'm going to move on to the new Championship's favourite scoreline and go for Middlesbrough to win by 2-1. So with that all done, let's go and have a quick recap of what I've gone for this weekend. I've got Leeds United with the biggest win of the week, a 3-0 win at home to Cardiff City to get back on track. Couple of 2-0 wins in there for Sheffield Wednesday and West Brom. But crucially, I've gone for Sunderland to lose ground in that automatic promotion race. All of the top three I've gone for victories, with Sunderland losing away at Middlesbrough. Those are just my predictions for match week 30 though. Do you agree or disagree? Let me know in the comments below and give me your predictions for this weekend's action. If you beat or match my overall score, you'll get a shout out in the next full recap. That will be next week Thursday when we look ahead to the official match week 31, which has been depleted due to the FA Cup. Between now and then, though, we will be back on Sunday to have a look at and preview 3 massive rearranged midweek fixtures. It could be a very important midweek, albeit with only 3 fixtures. So I hope I'll see you for that one. But in the meantime, if you did enjoy this, please do chuck a thumbs up on it, subscribe and turn that notification bell on to stay up to date with everything. And I'll see you back here on Sunday evening to look ahead to 3 very important fixtures.